you very much, and thank you for the invitation. My name is Michael, and I hate PowerPoint, so this is the only slide you're going to get from me today. I do have some videos for you that I want to show you. In this talk, I want to talk about my work in aviation human factors, show you some video on eye tracking for training for pilots. And then I want to present some ideas of how we could use VATSIM for research, or how research in human factors could benefit VATSIM. I'm a human factors psychologist. I work in Halden, Institute for Energy Technology. You might know that from Scheller, that's headquarters, and down in Halden we have the nuclear side of IFE. I'm also a VATSIM Norway member. I'm a tower controller, so when you get a guy with a German accent on VATSIM Norway, that's me. Before we start on the aviation side, I just want to show you some video of what we do in Halden. So you might know that up until a few years ago, Halden, IFE Halden had one of the best research nuclear reactors in the world. For 50 years, we had a research reactor operating there that shut down in 2018. Now we still have more than 100 people working at IFE in Halden on nuclear safety and other safety-related issues. Our main facility is there on the right. It's called the Halden Man-Machine Lab, where we do studies on digital control rooms, stress, situation awareness, communication, fatigue, and so forth. So we do continue work in the nuclear side, and I'm just going to show this little video because it also links a bit to the other work I'm doing. So, as I said, I'm a human factors psychologist, and I specialize in biometrics, so measuring physical aspects of a human, such as eye gaze, heart rate, posture, with the aim of making some inference about a mental state or a state of the user, such as fatigue. So eye tracking, we can infer fatigue or stress from pupil size, pupil movements, fixations, and so forth. But just to give you a quick flavor of what nuclear operation is like, so we get crews from the US that participate in our studies in Halden, and my lab, the Biometrics Lab, has developed eye tracking and head tracking software that helps us put all this data together. So normally in these studies we look at human performance, so for instance task performance, interview debriefings, but of course we would like to know in these digital control rooms how often do they use certain features in the interface, and for that we've developed software that lets us do head tracking and eye tracking of multiple participants and then project it onto a 3D model of the environment. So this is the operator looking at the screens, and this is a representation of the screens. So someone who's observing this knows exactly what the operator is looking at and what the whole crew is looking at. So when we go to the videos on the aviation side, then we'll see that more clearly, how that is a benefit for an instructor, for instance. But that's the nuclear side, and of course the nuclear side is what is our main work at IFE, and it pays the bills. But of course, as many of us, I'm an aviation enthusiast. So in my lab, in the Biometrics Lab, I also set up a little flight simulator. This lab, this part of the lab is called the Connected Mobility Lab. So we have a flight simulation, and behind this we have a 3-screen virtual tower simulation that simulator that is of course Euroscope. So you can do interactive sort of joint simulations between a pilot and an air traffic controller in this lab itself, or of course on VATSIM. On the other side of the lab, we have a driving simulator and a pedestrian simulator, so that we can do interactive studies with both a driver driving a driving simulator and a pedestrian. So, for instance, issues like automated driving, self-driving cars, where a pedestrian might be more cautious about stepping into the road if they see that the person doesn't have the eyes on the road. So this is the facility, and of course for us it's really great to have tools like Microsoft Flight Simulator and VATSIM, because if you compare that to the professional simulations, they are astronomically expensive and have many disadvantages that we don't have with these tools, and I'll get a little bit more into that later in the talk. But let me get to the more exciting side, I think, for you. As I said, so our main work is on the nuclear side, so aviation is a bit of a side hustle for us. But of course, it's very interesting to do. So we applied the same technology that I showed previously, the eye tracking, head tracking technology, to a 737 simulator. That's at the aviation school in Lund, where they train ab initio training for 20 737 pilots each year. So these are people going to airlines, and I think these students here that we had were in their second or third year of training, so they were already quite experienced. So I'm going to talk you through this. This software is an open source software that we developed. It's called Synopticon. And I'll just sort of demonstrate, this part of the talk, I just want to demonstrate some ways that research can help improve aviation aspects. So here this looks like a 3D model of a similar, like a VR model, but it is a VR model, but everything we do in our lab is not based on VR goggles. So as you will see in a second, it's obviously a flight deck simulator. It's not a motion simulator, but it's a full flight deck 737 simulator, and we then do real-time measurements of the eyes and of the hands. So we also track the hands with an optical tracking system. That is, of course, a huge benefit for any instructor that wants to pay attention of what the pilots are looking at, because normally the instructor sits here behind the pilots. So this is a live equivalence of this is what the pilots are doing, and this is the eye tracking representation. So for an instructor, it's impossible to really know what the pilots are looking at, because you sit behind them and you can't even see their face. You can maybe see their head orientation, but you can't see fast switches or scan patterns that go between the instruments and the, at the outside, for instance, or between instruments, or the right distribution. If you have a pilot flying and a pilot monitoring, you might have both of them monitoring or both of them, so you don't know what's going on unless you have a tool like this. This is what an eye tracker normally gets you. So I brought eye tracking glasses with me. They have a video camera in the front, at the middle, and then they have one camera for each eye, and they look at the orientation of your eyes. And if you would just use an eye tracker, which has been done in aviation training, this is all you get. And of course that's okay, but if you think about an instructor who has to follow these for a 30-minute scenario, it's not going to work very well, because you have two pilots, you don't get the hand tracking, you don't get anything else. So you really need something like Synopticon, because it also then produces heat maps, it produces statistics, and you can sort of scope it for certain time frames. So you can say, I only want it after the engine you flame out for 5 minutes, or I only want statistics for 3 minutes before touchdown, and so forth. The nice thing about Synopticon is that you get this view as a live view and as immediate playback. So there's no kind of conversion, uploading into the cloud and waiting for half an hour. So it's very nice in this. But of course, it's a fun tool. We're very proud of it. The tool also supports the modeling of the cockpit, and as you know, cockpits are not rectangular boxes, so we model the cockpit to an accuracy of 1 millimeter, which is what we need, because if you project the eye tracking gaze direction, it needs to be very precise. So we're quite happy with that. I'll just switch to another video that shows some of the analysis tools in that, and then I will just say a little bit about what is the utility of something, or what did we find. So this was basically a proof of concept where we had 20 students from this flight school. Here I just show this is like a sequence diagram that shows you a distribution of what people are looking at. So when you see that the person hasn't looked at the primary flight display for a minute, you can then say, well, instead their attention was captured by something else. So that's what a sequence diagram is good for. But so what's the utility of that? Well, it was quite interesting to look at these videos from the back and then see how these young pilots can get quite fixated on the instruments. So one thing that we saw quite consistently is that the pilots, when they were coming into land, some of them kept their eyes on the primary flight display up until about 50 feet of 80 feet, which is, of course, so basically they didn't look out at the runway until that point. So they were just flying the needles and not looking out, which is, of course, not ideal. So those are the kind of insights that you could get. In reality, you would probably use it for remedial training. If you see a weakness in one of the pilots, you could use eye tracking to target that quite specifically. But I also want to mention some maybe problems with that, because it all looks very cool, it is very cool, it is very useful, but you don't really see any airlines using this technology yet. We did an interview study with instructors, and we tried to find out what is the actual scan pattern that you expect in a certain situation. Because we could program the system to identify scan patterns and automatically say yes or no, but we need to know what the right scan pattern is. It turns out it's really difficult for the instructors to agree what a pilot should look at in a certain situation. Of course, you can have a generic scan pattern, but in a certain situation, in an emergency, or even in a, during takeoff or landing, if you see a certain scan pattern and you ask them, is that scan pattern wrong? They say, well, it's not really wrong, but it's not really what they should do. And you think, well, that doesn't help me very much, because I need, so to get them to agree on really what the right scan pattern is almost impossible. So that's been a real problem, and I'll talk about how that could be, maybe improved in the future. So you don't see these kind of technologies at the moment in airlines. The only exception is Emirates. So Emirates is getting a new 777, the 777X simulator, and that will be the first simulator in the world that has eye tracking natively built in. So it won't be using glasses. It uses cameras that are built in seamlessly. You can't even see them into the cockpit. So the Emirates is the most advanced in this field, but they have the same challenge. Of course, they have the data, but they don't know what to do with the data. You need tools then to really sort of like a business intelligence tool to say, well, what does it all mean and how can I use it? Because even though tools like these make it easier for the instructors, it still isn't tied up with what they're trying to evaluate. So that will be a big challenge for Emirates and for others. I also did an interview studies with all airlines that have used eye tracking in the past, like Alaska Airlines, Air France, FedEx, Lufthansa, and they usually didn't get far beyond proof of concept or research-oriented studies. So it's still a bit of a challenge there. Okay, but this is really not directly linked to VATSIM. But let's get to that point, to serious gaming and how VATSIM and research could be linked. So then there are two aspects that we should consider. One is, of course, how could VATSIM be improved through human factors research, or how could VATSIM contribute to human factors research? If you look at these there's a couple of obvious big benefits of a network like VATSIM compared to a simulator like this. The big problem that we had in this commercial flight deck simulator is that it's a complete black box. So the system doesn't give any data like you would in Microsoft Flight Simulator, where you can use MobiFlight and get anything you want. It's a black box, so we couldn't even get switch positions, so we had to do hand tracking instead. So using something like a sort of a gaming level enthusiast simulator gets around of these problems. Of course, the other problem is that pilots are very, very expensive to have as participants in studies. And of course, the other issue is the data issue. So the confidentiality, all of the union issues and limitations that you have when you want to use professionals, as opposed to a network like VATSIM where the data is really open for you, makes a huge difference. So it is a very, very enticing and sort of interesting proposition to do that. So let's talk first about the kind of more vague question of how could VATSIM benefit from human factors. Well, I think VATSIM is doing a lot of things right already, and I think there are a lot of people who have thought about the training aspect of becoming a controller and are doing a really great job. I think there's still some room for improvement and some opportunities. So having gone through the tower training myself, it's a very high stress environment, and I think we all know how long it takes to become a controller. There's a 1-year waiting list, and then there's usually 3 to 4 months for every step. There's mentors, which is a fantastic system. But I think, a more sort of formal or in-depth use of feedback from trainees would be very useful. So for me, for instance, the workload in some situations was far too high, so it was too high too early. So my learning over a 1-hour training session was really low, because after 20 minutes I became overloaded, and after that I was just in panic mode. So these would be very interesting questions to see how that could be adapted and improved. And of course, I mean, VATSIM is an amazing data source. You have training reports, you have all the data that you accumulate when you control or when you fly. So to look at factors using big data tools and AI tools to look for patterns in this, or even just statistical tools, would really be interesting for VATSIM and for others, also for the professional world. So I think that there's a conversation to be had about how that can be organized, how we could have a program that, or a kind of an initiative where I'm sure there are training improvement initiatives already in VATSIM, but how you could bring some of these knowledge from the research side into that. Now let's go to the serious gaming side and how VATSIM could be a resource for research that then benefits professional pilots, professional air traffic controllers. So serious gaming, of course, doesn't mean people like my teenage son who spends 10 hours a day in front of the computer. It means the application of gaming mechanics or gaming sort of concepts to professional training. In Norway, there's quite a big industry in this area in terms of the VR tools for training for people working in the oil industry, maintenance training, safety training in the oil and gas industry. And of course, this has been tried in other sectors as well. So what I see as the potential there to do research for VATSIM to contribute to professional research is in 2 areas. Well, let me just first talk about the initiatives that are ongoing in Europe, for instance, for research in air traffic control. So for the ATC side, of course, you have a huge European project called CESAR. CESAR is has the aim of building the next generation air traffic control system where everything is more flexible, everything is more efficient, everything is more digital. And it's an ongoing program. I think it's been over 10 years since it started, and it's very well funded. Unfortunately, for people like me, most of this funding goes to established countries, human factors countries like Netherlands, Germany, Italy. So to break into that area is quite difficult. But of course, they're doing research in in air traffic control. The problem even they have is that when you look at their studies, it's not like they have studies with 100 people. They have studies maybe with 20 people. So the more participants you have, the better, usually. Also, the other problem that they have is that the technology is very costly to develop. It's, even getting it into a study is a big challenge. So I think, again, being in the non-professional side of things, there's a real benefit here, because even within Microsoft Flight Simulator world, VATSIM world, you have some amazing tools now like Say Intentions or Beyond ATC, where they're really pushing things far beyond what is being discussed in CESAR or in the real world air traffic control. I think it would be absolutely fascinating to look, to get a group of volunteers from the VATSIM community and do some evaluations, focus groups, performance evaluations of how well do these enthusiast level gaming tools really work at the moment. I mean, Beyond ATC is using language models, and that's exactly the discussion that is being had in all the professional aviation sectors. How can we use language models? So I think this, in terms of of course, VATSIM could be used for a lot of topics. It could be used for fatigues research. It could be used for training research. But I think these kind of areas where we could, for instance, try new types of approach patterns, more flexibility, AI-based support tools, AI-based route optimization. I mean, it's not something that is necessarily ready now, but if you can find universities or partners to develop some of these algorithms, it would be very easy to put it into either a VATSIM sandbox or actually to use it in VATSIM for real. So I think there's a real opportunity there. And the benefit of this is that VATSIM really sits at a good position. I mean, of course, Microsoft Flight Simulator is a game. It's a game and a simulator, and depending on how you use it, it's more of a simulator or more of a game. But when you see the statistics on VATSIM radar, for instance, that some of these pilots have 20,000, 30,000 hours on Microsoft or on VATSIM. I mean, no captain, no airline captain at 60 years old has 30,000 hours, right? So, and of course, this is not equivalent. Of course, a 30,000 flight simmer and a 30,000, those are different things, but they're not completely different. So in research, I mean, we do research with university students who don't have any experience, and we say, we can use these results to make, to use them for professionals. And so it's always a matter of not directly applying your findings, but having a theory that then fits the data and so on and so forth. So that's one area where, I'm trying to assemble a small group of people from, for instance, Avinor and Luftfahrtwerke and VATSIM to sort of do some brainstorming of what we could do, what would benefit the professionals, what would be interesting for our researchers, and what would be interesting for VATSIM. The other area, just to finish up with that, is training debriefing tools. So when you look at some areas like the defense sector, you can see now commercial products coming out that based on language models that you can use for mission critique. So let's say you have a Norwegian Air Force training sortie, either in the simulator or in real life, and data from that goes into a database, and then you can use a language model to say, well, what were the critical mistakes that were made, and the language model will go and query the database. And I don't know how well it works. I've seen it from 2 commercial vendors. It looked impressive, but I haven't been able to test it independently. But seeing it from 2 commercial vendors, it gives me some confidence, even though having worked with language models has been a disappointment so far, but I think they have a lot of potential. So, and I think it's really interesting to bring those tools into everyday spaces and not just make them available to extremely wealthy companies that can buy them from extremely expensive vendors. And I think it's a really good community, the VATSIM flight simulating community, because there is so much technical knowledge in there when you see beyond ATC, for instance, say intentions. So I think at training, and as you can see, I'm very much into eye tracking for training. I think a mission critique training debriefing system would be the absolute gold standard, both for VATSIM. I think it would be fantastic. Me as a controller, if I could get more frequent feedback. Because I have a mentor for 3 months and then I don't have anything. So if there was a system that could monitor me and give me feedback on where I'm slipping, you're worse now than you were half a year ago, or you're better than, that would be fantastic, I think. And of course, for these professional settings, I think that's also a huge benefit, also for pilots in training, to get these kind of tools. And of course, for instructors that get, as you can see, you can get a lot of data with these modern simulators, but what do you do with it? What do we do as VATSIM? What do we do with all the data? What are we doing with the data now? Instead of, mostly we do end-of-year statistics, but there's a lot more in this. So I think, just to wrap up, this is a really fascinating area, evaluation of air traffic control tools, such as Beyond ATC, using our community, and then mission critique, training, debriefing systems based on language models, applied to a VATSIM context is what I would love to do in the next few years. With that, I thank you very much for your attention. I will take questions, and then also anyone who wants to try an eye tracker afterwards can come up and I can give you a demo of that. Thank you very much for your attention.